Let's break the mold and stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. Welcome to Stanley on 7. We're here until it's here.
Welcome back. This is Stanley on 7th, your favorite Wild podcast, a Pull Tab Sports production. And we're going to bring you an episode. It's a little bit different here today. I'm in studio. Kinger's traveling the world. He's out in the Big Apple. We've got him via Zoom. How are you doing out there, Kinger?
Been great. New York's back. Not all the way back, but it's back.
So New York, where are you staying? Because it kind of looks like you're at the Mall of America Rainforest Cafe right now. There's leaves in the background. There's shrubbery left and right. You've got banana leaves. Like, you've got a little bit of everything.
I'm holding a koala bear just underneath the counter here. This is called Public. It's a high-end hotel. In New York, you basically have crappy hotels for $100 in Times Square, $1,000 hotels, which I don't do, and I'm right in the $300 nice enough so your wife doesn't get mad hotel.
Nice. Any sweet amenities there besides the shrubbery?
It's pretty minimalist. It's one of these places where it's like kind of Japanese, like there's just a essentials closet where you go to get towels and stuff. So no, it's pretty sparse, like sparse on purpose.
Well, since we're on the topic of appearances, looks like you picked up a new hat, and I don't know if you were inspired by the color of my baby diaper hat, and you went out and got a Carhartt Wild hat yourself. That's looking pretty sharp. It is Carhartt. Is that actually Carhartt?
Yeah, this is brand new. NHL store this week. It's a little collab, Carhartt and the NHL. So they're making Carhartt NHL hats.
I kind of feel like you could go ice fishing. Like that's the hat everybody needs to go ice fishing, maybe farming. That's just an all around multi-purpose hat.
Can I tell you my NHL store story?
Yes.
So I hadn't been there in a couple of years. It's a new location. And I walked in, and at the NHL store, they have every team's jersey, and they pick kind of your best guy, and they hang it on the wall. So I was really excited to be back because it's McDavid, Matthews, Jack Hughes, and then just a beautiful 97 jersey right by all these other stars. And it was like, we got a guy. Hey, we got a guy that fits in here. It was awesome.
That is kind of nice. Like you realize the Wild have a presence. They have their star, like a star is born kind of, and I think in Minnesota, everybody kind of realizes that, but it is nice to see on the national stage that there is a star in the state of hockey, and he's getting recognized. He's getting marketed. So since we're talking about that, how about the All-Star Skills game and Kirill doing the Ovechkin? What do you think of that stuff?
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned it. I was at the bar that night, and there was a guy we were with, and somebody was trying to explain the skills competition to him. And this conversation was like, well, then Kirill dressed up as Ovechkin, and then Jack Hughes was a magician, and he went in a little box, and baby Jack Hughes came out, and then Zegras was in the movie Dodgeball, and this guy just looked at us like, what's that got to do with hockey? It was crazy. Different experience.
Yeah, I don't know how I felt about it. I mean, I saw mixed reviews on Twitter and all around. You had the showmanship, which I think was kind of cool, but I don't think it was captured that well. Like, you had Pietrangelo trying to be like a Blue Man Group guy with the lights on his jersey, but the viewer never saw it. And then you had the hangover and Jack Hughes and the magic trick. That was a little weird at times too. Like, it was cool. It was creative. I think the execution can be better at times, but again, these guys aren't professional actors, they're going out there. So I think that was cool, and it's good for the game. Kirill doing Ovechkin, I thought he did a pretty good job, right? And the hard part is trying to analyze that, because you have a guy doing a special trick that really, like, he shot a puck right-handed. Are you going to give him credit for that? And he scored on it? Yes, kind of, but that's not what it's about. It's not about scoring. Some people are upset because Pietrangelo, he didn't score on his, and he actually won that breakaway challenge, right? And that's not the only event, but I think that was kind of their marquee event. That's the one that they wanted all the eyeballs on. I thought it was okay, but I also think at times it fell a little flat for me too. Like it felt awkward watching it.
Yeah, it was a little cringy, but how about like Zegras's goal was unbelievable. And it kind of got lost because there was so much other stuff going on. This was interesting. Cards, NHL store sold out of the number 6 and the letter A, and they said it was because of Zegras.
Yeah, he
can't make custom jerseys. That's kind of wild, right?
Yeah, he's a star. He's marketable. Again, there's a lot of layers to this. So he technically wasn't an all-star either, right? So special invite, and then he comes in. He kind of stole the show, that move, and the dodgeball theme, blindfolded, the puck on a stick, like the actual move there. People are like, what did he do? Did he have magnets in his stick? Like, how did he get it to stick? And I was like, I think that's actually like the skill, the trick of it, right? And he's a polarizing player, man. He's confident, and you see some of the audio that had come out. He was mic'd up. He's not afraid to try stuff, and he's going to be fun. He's going to be good for hockey. He's a star. I think a lot of times out west too, the players kind of get forgotten because it's NHL Network, it's New York where you are. Obviously, you travel to the Big Apple. You forget about those people on the West Coast a little bit. Those games don't start till 9:00 at night, so they just don't get a ton of attention, right? But to have a star like that out there, a polarizing figure, that will be great for hockey on the West Coast.
Yeah, I did have one more East Coast interaction. I was getting on an elevator, and a guy saw my Wild hat, and he just said, "Man, I love your decor." And he just said, "Billy G, he don't play around." And I was like, yes. It's kind of spread, man. They said the Russian tourists are just crushing the Kaprizov jerseys out here in New York. So we're building something. We're not his actual quote is, he said, "You guys used to be vanilla, but now you got something going on, and Billy G, he don't play around." I love that.
So that's kind of crazy. Could you pick up where this individual was from? Like, were they New York? Were they Boston? Because like the fact that they know Billy G, I think you could go around to random fans in New York and be like, "Hey, who are you a fan of?" And they might say the Flyers, and you're going to say, "Who's the general manager there?" They might not know, right? Like, I think casual fans aren't going to know the general manager of every team around, right? But the people know Billy G, and they know he's the general manager here. Where was this guy from?
He's a New Yorker. I think it's because Billy had success with the Devils, and he was clearly a hockey guy. But I just felt so good. Like, I mean, to be back here after 2 years and be walking through that NHL store and seeing, I think that jersey was probably Parisi, a couple of years ago, which is fine, but it doesn't sort of fit with all these other young dynamic stars. So it was just so cool to see the 97 up there and be like, yeah, we're in the Marvel universe now. We got one. We got our guy.
It's crazy because it's like there's this wave of young talent that has skills that nobody else in the league has. Like, you have great players like Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, still, very productive at the NHL level. But there's this new wave of young player that's just different. And they can skate and they can stick handle. They're pulling off moves like Zegras like we've never really seen before. And the NHL is really getting behind these guys. And I think teams are too. You look at a guy like Boldy. For some reason, these kids aren't afraid to just jump into the NHL and take it by storm. And they're skilled and they fit in, man, and they're good. But the NHL, I think, has recognized this too. Like, hey, there's a marketability to this, to these young players. Let's jump on it. These guys are fun. Let's celebrate it.
Yeah, Matthew Tkachuk, same thing, right? I mean, how many goals does he have between his own legs this year? It's kind of this new school TikTok NHLer, but I don't know. I think if you resist it, you just look like an old angry dude, right?
Right, the old curmudgeon. So I'm going to be the old curmudgeon right here. So back to Zegras at the All-Star game. I thought he had the best one. He executed it. He scored the best move. I love the dodgeball theme. Pietrangelo wins it because John Hamm. But how about it? I think the winner of each event gets $30,000. So if you're Zegras, are you a little bit rattled? So are you rattled that Pietrangelo basically or John Hamm stole 30 G's from you? I'd be choked.
Well, there was the one quote. Did you see him talking to Hughes? And he was kind of like shocked, and he just goes, "That's the sickest move I ever did, man." He was kind of like he couldn't believe he didn't win. My kid said, Carts, my son, he says, You just got a bunch of wax on there, Dad. Bunch of wax. Puck stuck to his stick. I tried to find a video of him picking the puck up at center ice, but I think you're right. I think he just grabbed that thing normal, and he can do that. I don't think it was like Lester Hayes and the old Raiders playing D-back with a bunch of sticky stuff on his blade. Do you?
No. So if you go back and watch, I think it was when he was wearing a U.S. jersey, maybe World Junior. He was doing that move in warmups, and he just does that like almost every warmup, where he picks it up and he twirls it around and he puts it between his legs, picks it back up real quick, smooth. He can do that. That's his move. That's his thing. I think he's already pulled off the Michigan. He's got the flip goal. Like he can. That's a skill of his. So I don't think there's any trickery to that one. Even though that in that event there was trickery, that's what kind of made it sweet, was the fact that there was no trick other than that was simply his skills. But the NHL is not all roses and all that stuff too. Like there's some love hate there too. We love these guys, but talk about hate. How about the Jets versus the Wild? I mean, they hate each other. The game, how that unfolded. Were you able to watch, and what'd you think?
Well, it was amazing. I got a text, and it was a picture of Foligno in the penalty box with a bloody hand, and Zuccarello was sitting next to him, and it said something like, Foligno just committed a felony. And so then I had to watch the game on DVR, and he gets in that fight early, but that's not the photo I saw. So I know there's another fight coming. It was actually a great way to watch a hockey game. It was like someone just showed you one frame from the movie and you had to wait for it. But I don't know what was said, or it was kind of disturbing to watch our Superman become so angry.
Yeah, his wires touched for sure. Let's get into that. So it had a physical tone right off the bat. I don't think the Wild were engaged. I think that's always the trouble after All-Star break, and you see, or guys have gotten away from it and they deserve to get away from it, and they go to warmer weather, enjoy themselves, they come back, they got to jump on a flight, go to Winnipeg. You could see where it's challenging, or maybe an excuse as to why they wouldn't have their best game, but they went out and they couldn't find it. And I don't think they found it against the Jets. I think they got a little bit frustrated, but the Jets were a little bit more ready, and maybe there was an advantage there because they were at home and they jumped on the Wild early. They really did. But how about the hit from Dylan on Foligno? I didn't necessarily think it was dirty or that it warranted a penalty or that it was too terribly late, but it is a dirty hit because in the NHL, every player knows where every player is at all times. And then you also know then if you get hit by surprise, it was on purpose and somebody came out of a position knowing that you're in a vulnerable spot to lay a hit on you. And that's what Dylan did. He's not supposed to be in that spot. And not that he's not supposed to be there. It's, okay, Dylan, we know your responsibilities as a D-man in this situation. That is not a normal play. So it was on purpose. And that's why a fight breaks out after that. It's not that there's just a clean hit. It's the NHL in some ways is easier to play in for that reason, because and can account for everybody on the ice at all times. You can just trust people are going to be where they need to be. And in the American League, East Coast, college, high school, whatever, there's less and less of that accountability. You don't know where everybody is, and it's read and react. So that's why Marcus he doesn't have to shoulder check there, and he will now, right? But he can count on the fact that weak side D is not coming to hit him. Dylan comes in, crunches him, and this is on purpose. And I believe that the Superman punch Marcus Foligno on Dylan was part of the reason that Dylan saw 17 skating the puck up the ice. This is my chance. I'm going to get him right now. Do you think that there's a chance that Dylan laid that hit on Foligno because he was unhappy with the Superman punch and being the victim of a meme for a couple of weeks?
Is that for sure the guy he did that to? What did I text you before? Was that him?
Yeah.
Oh, man. So I want your take on this. So he gets hit by Dylan. He wants to defend himself, right? And then Greenway jumps Dylan. He gets stuck with Lowry, who pulls him down from behind. So I always thought the second fight, because I knew I had this photo of it, I thought the second fight for sure was going to be Dylan. But he ends up fighting Lowry again, and he's absolutely enraged. So what do you think happened? I think you could be right that Dylan didn't like being the getting posterized by Superman, and so he tried to take liberties. But I was confused why he ended up fighting Lowry the second time and didn't, get a crack at Dylan.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about either. I think that the second fight was just a thing of passion, and Marcus maybe also didn't like the way the first fight went, and that was the opportunity that came up, so he just jumped on it again. But I look at that fight, and before we get to that, I hear fans all the time say, "Man, this is so stupid. Why does somebody have to fight after a clean hit?" And we're on the other side of the coin now, and we've seen Matt Dumba have to fight for a clean hit, or some of these guys, and people get upset and outraged. Well, I don't think that Jordan Greenway had to go run Dylan for it. But at the same time, I think it sends a message to Dylan and to the Jets that you can't just run around on us and hit. And that's the purpose of the message of the fight. And is it legal? Is that hit legal? Yes. Yes, it is. Could the Wild just continue play and the game would go on as normal? Yeah, probably. But I don't think in this regard, the game kind of polices itself a little bit. Jordan Greenway sends a message right off the bat to Dylan. Boom. Okay. I actually don't even fight, but I don't like that because I know you ran out of position. I know there was intent, and we're not going to stand for it. And I'm willing to, and maybe the league needs to do this, is give the other team, because this is what happened, I think, is Greenway got an extra 2 for rough. So the Wild are short. So you don't give them an instigator because that's a big penalty, but there's a penalty to pay for having to fight after a clean hit, and you get an extra rough. So you're going to be shorthanded. I think every team would be cool with that, and they'll kill it. But I also think that Marcus Foligno actually is somewhat, well, in hindsight, he's not lucky, but that Lowry grabbed him because he would have been the third man in on a fight. The Dylan Greenway fight had already started, and it was in its midst, and Foligno was upset and ran over, was going to grab Dylan. If Lowry doesn't grab him, Foligno's third man in, and Foligno's done for that game, right? And once again, in hindsight, that would have been a good thing because now he ended up getting a 2-game suspension. He's out the next couple. But I'm curious your stance on what you feel if after a good, clean check, is it okay for the guy to have to fight? And do you understand the messages that are sent when that guy has to fight?
I'm totally fine with it. I think sometimes we forget these guys on the ice aren't getting 10 versions of the replay shown to them. So when you see one of your star players get popped, you don't know if it's in the head, you don't know if it's in the shoulder, it's in the moment. I think it's great. Hockey is a violent sport. It's a fast sport. I don't need it to change, especially with our conversation from earlier, Ryan, with all these kind of lacrosse sort of social media NHL. I love keeping some of the truculence and some of the violence, and I'm totally fine with it. And how about, by the way, Lowry just tossing Foligno down from like a horse collar from behind? Is that just a pressure point where he was amazingly strong, or is that guy, how did he do that? How did he throw Foligno down by like the collar of his jersey?
I think
is that being not talked about enough?
I think, I don't think it is, but I think he caught Foligno by surprise. Like Foligno was going to engage with Dylan, and then he gets caught off guard. Again, I think people do forget too that you're on a tiny steel blade, right? So if somebody pulls you in a different direction, it's hard to recover. It's not like you're on your feet. You just catch your balance again quickly. So he went down, and let's give Lowry some credit. Like, he's a big guy. I thought he did pretty darn well in that fight. Marcus he's not only a tough guy, but he can fight. Like, technically, he's a good fighter. And Lowry did pretty darn well standing up for himself. I think probably in both fights.
If you had a rough week like our boy Foligno, and you find yourself hurt, arrested, or fired, don't wait for the NHL to figure it out. Call Wackler Law, go online, and work with the guy that's been doing it for 25 years. He's fiercely independent and afraid of no one. That's our folks at Wackler Law.
Again, I think the fighting after a clean hit protects the star players on the team. And that's why Marcus Foligno is so valuable. And that's why Kirill eventually will not take the hits that you don't want him to take, because that would be an angle to slow Kirill down, is all of a sudden you just lay big bodies on him, right? Just who cares? Just send out your goon and just run Kirill. Well, that's what Marcus is here for, to make sure that somebody doesn't do that. And the refs, there's clean hits that are heavy but unintentional and unnecessary. and the fighting cleans it up. But again, I think you could call an extra penalty, so the rough like that, so all of a sudden the team that chases the guy around has to kill a penalty. That would be fine. But I'm all for it. I think fans have a really hard time understanding why people have to fight after a clean hit. I understand that argument, but I also think that and maybe I don't do a good enough job explaining it. It makes the game safer for the Stars. It really does.
I agree. I got two questions for you. So, while I was in New York, my daughter asked me about Foligno kind of randomly. She's like, "What's this guy about?" I go, "He's Superman." She's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "He's like this tough guy, but he's like honorable and good. He's like a hero." And she just started laughing, like, "You are just so, your head is so far up your own ass." But that's why I think it was so disturbing to see him just filled with frothy rage. I think all of us Minnesotans were sort of like, holy, is this okay? This is like Superman 2 when he gets drunk in the one Superman. What in the world happens to touch his wires? How does Marcus, our hero, get so upset?
Well, I get upset with this narrative too. Like, people are judging him in that moment. I think you have to break it down and look at hockey players. They are not professional fighters. They're not boxers. They're not MMA guys. Like, they happen to fight in their game, but it's not practiced. Like, at no point during this season will Marcus or anybody on that club practice fighting, right? So they're not professional fighters. It's part of it. Now, when you think about that, hockey is the only professional fighting sport that does it without gloves on, bare knuckle boxing. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. In all honesty. Now, all of a sudden you're staring at, and I think people forget this, you're staring at a big, strong man with bare knuckles wanting to punch your face in, right? People forget that is real life. Like, he is staring at somebody wanting to punch him in the face. So every once in a while, fight or flight kicks in and the emotions get the best of you. I in fact love to see it. Marcus is really controlled. And I think you have to give more respect to the guys that can control their emotions in that spot. And Marcus has shown that, where he lets up or he stops the fight after he's known he's landed a good one. But don't be so hard on a guy when his wires touch and he gets a little upset. Like, the guy's, he's fighting a big, strong man without gloves on, trying to punch him in his face. And it might hurt his image for a moment, but at the same time, like, that's the guy you want. Like, I want a guy that's passionate about it, a guy that's willing to fight for it. He's putting on the line, and give him a little grace. Like, if he was upset and he did something in the middle of a fight, like, just imagine, put yourself in that spot where you are in the middle of a fight and you're being judged by everybody on your actions in the middle of that fight, right? And I just think you got to give the guy a little bit of grace. But now, what made him mad? I've been there before, and I've actually cognitively had to think about this and say, okay, it doesn't pay to fight mad. It's actually better if I'm like controlled in that situation, if I have my wits about me, than fighting with rage. Now, fighting with rage, like, you probably are a bit tougher and you land a few more punches and it looks a little bit better, but all of a sudden you come away with a busted hand, or there's other things, consequences of that. So I think Marcus probably does it the right way, but for me, totally fine. I don't care. 2-game suspension. I think that's probably a good number for him. I look at the schedule, and it's that he's going to return to play against the Jets, right? So it's like, okay, well, player safety, you're setting this up for round 2, ding, ding, ding. But I also respect that the player safety didn't look at this and say, all right, well, we're just going to give Marcus an extra game because the way the schedule is laid out. They're looking at it kind of as an independent event. Marcus isn't a repeat offender. We're not just going to throw an extra game on there, and I think it's fine. He's going to lose like 30-some thousand in pay. So it would have been 33% more than that. 45,000 in pay he would have lost if they gave him an extra game. They didn't do that. So I respect the Department of Player Safety, and I think the way they look at it, this illustrates the fact that they kind of look at it as an independent play. They're not looking at the fight that happened before or after. This is what happened. This was the play, and they came down with the suspension. But how do you feel about it? 2 games? Did you see the knee? 2 games? Do you think it was fair?
I watched the knee this morning. I have zero issue with Marcus being filled with rage. I'm not judging him. It was interesting is all I'm saying. This kind of white tuxedo, Henrik Lundqvist, Superman guy, all of a sudden turning to Ralphie in in Christmas Story, just won't stop. It was just like weird. It was like, I wonder what's going on with Marcus. Why won't he stop? So I was just curious what was said, or do you just get punched somewhere in the nose where you're just so mad it hurt more? I'm just trying to figure out what happened that made him more upset than he usually is. I was just curious. I'm not judging him at all. I think it's great, actually. I want us to beat Minnesota nasty.
Ratty.
I'm down with all that.
Right.
I just don't know what happened.
The humor side of me thinks, because I think we saw that Marcus maybe stayed in Minnesota for the All-Star break, and then he's got all his teammates out on the beach, so maybe he's a little rattled that he missed out on some of the fun. Then he goes up to Winnipeg and right off the bat has to fight. I think there's something to it. The fact I think this Wild Club really does dislike the Jets, and they don't like that team, right? And they went up there, and I think you mentioned it. The Jets kind of out-wild the Wild that night. Like, they outplayed them kind of at their own game, and I think that probably upset them a little bit too. Like, they're fighting it, they're trying to find it, but somehow the Jets are just beating the Wild at their own game. So I think that it was a compilation of things. But do you think that the Jets have found the recipe to beat the Wild? And now this is ironic too. There's zero panic. We're not getting Big K on here again to talk about this, because it's not panic. But people are saying that hey, they're finally facing some adversity. It's one game. That's not adversity. That's not like they lost the game, so they don't have to panic. But did the Jets find a way to beat the Wild at their own game?
Couple points on this. I will tell you, it was troubling to watch that game on DVR in my hotel room here in New York, because the top line wasn't as noticeable. We didn't score any goals. They scored with the empty net, which in some cosmic way was upsetting to me to see a puck go into our empty net. But I think the Jets are Terminal 2 at the airport. They're not the Wild. They're Terminal 2. They're taking their one trip to Mexico for the whole year. They're drinking a margarita yard at the bar before they go there. They got bedazzled jeans. These guys are losers. They're like the B side of us. And when they come back into town, I think we're going to show them, we'll score 5 on them next week.
Man, if you're on that Wild team, don't you just go over? Because, I mean, Wheeler got upset. Scheifele was upset. I watched the game close. I thought Scheifele cheated the game probably more than anybody else on the ice a little bit. Like, don't you skate over to those guys instead of letting them get under your skin and say, hey, you had a good coach quit on you guys. What does that say about you? Like, Paul Maurice is a good coach and he just tapped out. Like, you had a coach. I don't know if I've ever seen this mid-season, a coach tap out. What'd you guys do? And I think you're right. Like, I think it's kind of smoke and mirrors with that club. And I don't think that they're a club that can compete with the Wild in the long run for sure. But they found a way to get under the Wild skin. But I do think the counter is that, hey, you guys you're not legitimate. And but by the way, how did you get that coach to tap out?
Yeah, it's like South Bend, Indiana, having a hockey team. I mean, screw Winnipeg. But it was a little concerning. They kind of threw a blanket on us. I hope that that's not a recipe that we just printed the blueprint, but I don't think so. I think they were coming back from break, like you said, and the wheels were just getting going again. Get the sweat out of the system and we'll be just fine. No panic.
So no goals that game. Point streaks end. Kevin Fiala. Kirill had an 8-gamer. Who else was it? Zuccarello had the 12-gamer. So a couple of point streaks end. We know that Fiala has been a streaky player in his past, and obviously 12 games, that was a nice run for him. Do you think that he's going to jump right back on the bandwagon and go on another 10-game heater, or what do you think the future looks like for that?
Fiala is a mystery to me. I don't know. I mean, he really helped us in January, like we predicted. I think Boldy's a game changer. Having Boldy there, putting the golf ball up on a toothbrush tee for you at every tee box. So I think as long as 12 is healthy, you're going to see the best version of Kevin.
Yeah, I don't disagree. But so my other concern after that game, and it's not a concern, but it's more of an observation, is okay, they had some magic going into the break. They come out of it, they kind of have a flat game, and how does Everson respond? Well, he has a practice yesterday, short practice early in the day, team building event. So the club went curling. Have you ever curled before?
Yeah, it's really hard.
I've never curled. I have heard it's hard. You've got the rocks. You've got to use your legs. It's hard to time it. But so just a fun event for them to go hang out. And but do you like that play for me from the coaching staff? And this could have been planned for a long time. I have no idea. But it just kind of looks like, okay, well, we got to get the group back together. Everybody kind of maybe went their own ways for the break or whatever it was, but now it's time. We saw this game. It wasn't our typical game. We didn't play the way we typically play. Let's get everybody back together. I love the fact that Everson, he's good. He presses the right buttons. So they go curl and they have lunch or whatever they're doing. Day event, they're not, burning the midnight oil, but good event. What do you think? Like, do you think that illustrates some panic? Do you think it's smart from Dean Evison? Or do you think it's just random?
I love it, man. This whole season's been about teammates. These guys love each other. Next man up. I think it's great. I am curious. Did you get any inclination who was the best at curling? Seems like Zuccarello would be good at curling. He's like a little dude. You got to kind of lay your leg out. You got to stretch out and get down low. Did you hear who was good at it?
No, I haven't heard who was good at it, but I did see a couple of guys. I don't know what the thing is called, like the sweeper. A couple of guys brooming. I don't know. I feel like Zuccarello would be a good broomer for sure. But no, I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either. I love that they did that though. I think you got to flush that Winnipeg game. That was just not us. Just flush it. Get out curling. Get your arms around each other again. I think Dean's a smart guy. He knows when to stir, and I think it's a good play. And we'll see. We got a really tough team coming in with Carolina. We're going to see.
So and I look at it. I think it was a good time to simply say. And again, I think Dean is really good at pressing the right buttons at the right time. He had an extra day. Let's flush that Winnipeg game. It's not a big deal. And the schedule all of a sudden starts to get tough, where there's a game every other day. Opponents are tough. They're going to be traveling. And I don't mind the schedule. I think the team is ready for the schedule. It was the same as last year. A lot of people are saying, oh man, they've got a terrible February and March. And they do have a lot of games packed in there. But they'll go to the same thing. They had success with it last year. They'll have their game. They'll have their day off, the morning skate, game, day off. And he'll manage the workload. The Wild have depth, which that word is a hot button issue right now, and we don't have to get in it, but they have depth, and they'll roll four lines and they'll play everybody. So I'm not concerned about the schedule at all, but it does get tougher in terms of opponents. You heard Big K last episode say that the Wild haven't been great against the playoff teams. Carolina, undoubtedly a playoff team, top tier team. So it's a good measuring stick for the Wild for sure.
Yeah, Florida, Carolina. We're going to start seeing some of these heavyweights and see how we hold up, our beloved Wild, see how they hold up against them. Hey, on the curling, something to find out. It's interesting. The Olympics, the curling group has been very upset because you can't drink beer in China. And apparently that's a huge part of the tradition. They call it broom stacking, where they set all their brooms down and they drink as a group after they curl. So I'm curious if this was pints and stones and the guys were drinking some beer, team building. If it was that type of team building, even better on Dean. Mean Dean. Well, broom stacking. I hope we did that.
I'm pretty sure that there was a beer or two consumed, but I think you're absolutely right. They kind of go together, right? Curling and beer. But that's hilarious. I haven't heard the story about the curlers, so they can't sneak beer into the Olympic grounds, or like, what's the deal there? Like, they can't go off, or?
No, dude. So China is basically like, once you're in the village, it's being run by like robots. Like when you get your food as an athlete, you go in, and like a robot gives you the food and you take it away. There is nothing human happening. And so the idea of like drinking beer with your teammates after you play them in the Olympics, a million miles away from what's happening in China right now.
That's crazy.
So that part's gone. Yeah. Hey, can we talk OPA for a minute?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I've been hearing about this thing that it maybe started with Kirill, but maybe not. Maybe Zuki, I don't know. But the exclamation when the Wild score is this word OPA, which I looked up. And check out this definition cards. In Romanian and Russian culture, OPA is used during the short phase of concentration on an action. This is the best part. The expectation of successful process during the action and the subsequent completion of it. For example, when throwing a basketball into the basket, getting off the bike, or picking up a child. So OPA is like, we did good, we scored. And so if you look in these clips of the Wild, when they're scoring goals and they're all hugging on the glass, they're yelling OPA to each other. It seems like your "don't forget about it" thing from Donnie Brasco, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was watching Donnie Brasco, and they use the word "forget about it," and "forget about it" means to actually forget about it. It actually means like that's cool. Like, you see that move from Zegras? Forget about it. Like, it's cool. Or you could say like, how about that suspension from Marcus Foligno? Forget about it. Like, it just means so many different things depending on how you say it, and that's Donnie Brasco. But I think the Wild do use OPA in a similar fashion. And I mean, so you found a literal definition of OPA?
Yeah, man, I love it. I like that it's Smurfy. Like when I was a little kid, the Smurfs always said Smurf for everything, kind of like forget about it. I just love that the definition includes getting off the bike or picking up a child. Like picking up a child and saying, "Opa." I don't know. I kind of want to throw Kirill in the air.
I was going to say, who's the child? Yeah, who's the child? It's Kirill.
It's got to be 97. Even though, like, technically you would think you'd be throwing Zuki in the air, but there's something about Kirill with the baby face. But yeah, I don't know. I think OPA's good, man. Let's make it mean so many things. And I support the Wild having their own vocabulary. It's just another thing that shows you this team is not the same vanilla Minnesota Mild that we used to know. This is breaking the mold.
So you've got Zuccarello, which is obviously Zuccarello and Kirill. Zuccarello. You've got the bold and the beautiful, Boldy and Fiala. You've got what do they call it? The geek line? Greenway, Erickson, Eck. The grief line. Greenway, Erickson, Eck, Foligno.
Wood chipper or the eraser. Nobody scores on those guys. I kind of like the eraser.
The eraser. Hey, let's get into that because we're going to have a special guest in today's episode. You're in New York, so unfortunately the interview, we didn't want to have to clomp on it with two Zoomers, but we'll have Greener in here. So let's talk about what we should talk to Greener about. You have a couple questions you want me to ask him because I'm going to sit down with him here in a few minutes.
Well, I think I'll rattle off some questions for you. I think, is he living with Boldy?
Yeah, he is. I've got that down too, yes.
So I need to know, like, what's that like? Are they the odd couple? Is their place clean? Both played in Boston. You got Boston College BU. The Beanpot just happened. The Beanpot final on Valentine's Day night. Like, I want to know a little bit about the Boston trash talking and kind of what their place looks like, you know?
Right.
So that's one. He signed the new deal, so he's got a fat wallet. I think he's a single dude. Like, what's his life look like? Did he buy something when he signed his deal?
Yeah, I want to know.
Is he going to Billy's Sushi?
Let's guess what he bought right now, because I think I have a guess. Just based on,
I would say watch. Watch, maybe. What do you think?
I'm gonna say PXG is like a brand new set of real nice golf clubs.
Oh, is he a big golfer?
Well, I mean, he just golfs, but yeah. I mean, the guy's an athlete. I've sat down with him before. He's hilarious. He thinks you give him 2 weeks practice, he can go 7 for 10 on 50-yard field goals. You could go on and on. That he's very confident in his physical abilities, which is great. I love it. But what other questions you got for him?
Olympics. You know, he played in the Olympics in this weird COVID era. I'm curious what that experience is like. We got kind of this young miracle team over there. What is he watching that? Does he care about that? That would be one. Let's get a weird one for him too. Hold on. Oh, so can we, without getting him in trouble, We need to know if there was a green light in Manhattan. We need to know who was the best at curling. And we need to know what he thinks the definition of OPA is. Those three things would be pretty good for me.
Yeah. The green light in New York, for sure there had to be one. He'll know, but yeah, it's great. No, so what do you think about the deal? 3 years, $9 million. I think it surprised some people. It doesn't surprise me. Led the team in assists last year. Wasn't on the power play. I've talked to Evison before, and everybody's like waiting for him to score a bunch of goals. You go back and look at his stats. He's scored in the past, but it's not like he's been the go-to scorer on the teams that he's on, right? Like it's a support role, and he's playing that right now. I think he's played it pretty well. They got a good thing going. I think there's some value to the fact that grief line, that the eraser line is the identity, and maybe they have to pay to keep that identity. And if that's keeping Greener and Ecker and Foligno, so now you know you've got those three guys for at least the next 3 years. You have a line that you can deploy against anybody for 3 more years. Yeah, man, I think that makes a ton of sense. You've got just a line that can go out and grind. And you look at it in the playoff matchups that the Wild are maybe going to have to go through. Colorado, you put them out there against McKinnon and say, hey, well, they're not scoring 5-on-5, and if we stay out of the box, we're good. And you go to Vegas, you do the same. Jack Eichel shut them down, and wherever it might be in the West, for the next 3 years, you've got those guys locked down.
Stanley on 7th is sponsored by Big Wood Brewery. If you haven't been to their tap room in White Bear, it's basically like going to your cabin, except you don't have to drive 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's an awesome place with great beer, including Bad Axe, which they have back on tap right now. Swing on into the tap room in White Bear Lake. Maybe you'll see Parts and myself, and we'll buy you a beer. That's Big Wood Brewery, proud sponsor of Stanley on 7th.
That's it. This is Stanley on 7th, your favorite Wild podcast. We're here
till it's here.
That way.